Olá! Seja muito bem-vindo ao canal da INP. Hoje você vai acompanhar uma hora de prática de listening com uma história em primeira pessoa narrada por Daniel, um viajante que foi explorar New York. O vídeo tem um ritmo lento para te ajudar a entender, repetir e absorver a pronúncia correta. Esse conteúdo foi pensado especialmente para quem quer treinar o ouvido e ganhar confiança ao falar inglês, principalmente em situações do dia a dia durante uma viagem. Então, prepare-se para prestar atenção à pronúncia e aprender inglês de um jeito direto, no papo mesmo. Let's go!
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm here to share with you my unforgettable experience of traveling to the United States for the first time. I've always wanted to visit the US, and when the opportunity finally came, I knew it would be the perfect chance not only to explore new places, but also to immerse myself in the English language. English has always been important to me, and I had been studying it for years, mostly through online resources, books, and videos. But nothing compared to the real experience of speaking English in the country where the language is spoken every day. My journey wasn't just about sightseeing and having fun. It was also about putting my English skills to the test in real-life situations. From airports and restaurants to subway rides and casual conversations with strangers, every interaction was an opportunity for me to practice and improve my English. This trip turned out to be the best language immersion experience I could have asked for, and it made me realize just how much confidence I gained throughout my journey. The first time I landed at JFK Airport in New York, I couldn't believe it. After months of planning, organizing, and a whirlwind of emotions, I was finally here. I had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it was real. The flight from Brazil was long, but I had made the most of the time, staying focused on my goal. I spent hours reading books in English, listening to podcasts, and practicing phrases that I knew would come in handy once I arrived. The entire flight was a part of the journey, a journey not just to a new city, but also towards mastering the English language. When the plane touched down, I felt a wave of excitement rush over me. The seatbelt signs blinked off, and passengers began standing up, gathering their belongings. I was so close to my destination, but there was still one big hurdle to overcome: immigration. I had read about the process online and had mentally prepared myself. I knew exactly what to expect. I had even practiced several key phrases in my head that I could use in case I got nervous. The anxiety hit me as soon as I stepped off the plane and walked toward the immigration checkpoint. I could feel my palms getting sweaty as I approached the officer's desk. This was the moment I had been preparing for. As I got closer, I tried to remain calm and steady my breathing. I had practiced how to greet the officer, how to respond to common questions, and how to stay confident no matter what. But the nervousness was overwhelming. The officer looked at me, smiled politely, and asked the first question. "What's the purpose of your visit?" This was the moment I had been practicing for. My heart started racing. I took a deep breath, smiled, and confidently replied, "I'm here on vacation." The words flowed out of me almost effortlessly. It was incredible to see how far I had come. In my mind, I could hear all the language lessons I had completed, all the hours spent practicing in front of a mirror, all the podcasts I had listened to, and all the little bits of English I had absorbed. This wasn't just a vacation. It was a milestone in my journey to mastering English. The officer didn't seem to mind my accent at all. He smiled, stamped my passport, and said, "Enjoy your stay." That was it. The barrier was broken. I made it through immigration, and I was officially in New York. The simple conversation made me realize just how much I had learned over the years. Sure, I had made mistakes in my grammar and pronunciation during my studies, but here I was, speaking to a real person in a real-life situation. It was a big win for me. As I stepped away from the immigration counter, I couldn't stop smiling. It was such a relief to know that I had communicated successfully in English, and even more so, that I had done it under pressure. I had been anticipating this moment for so long, and now it was behind me. I could finally breathe easy, and it felt amazing. But there was still so much more to explore and experience. I had arrived in one of the most exciting cities in the world, New York. The moment I stepped out of the terminal and into the bustling crowd, the energy of the city was palpable. People were walking fast, talking to each other, hailing cabs and hustling along the sidewalks. I could feel the excitement in the air. This was New York City, vibrant, diverse, and full of life, and I was about to experience it all. I grabbed my luggage and made my way to the subway station, following the signs for the air train. I knew how to use public transportation, but this was New York, and everything felt a little bit bigger, faster, and more intense. The subway system was vast and intimidating, but I was determined to navigate it. As I stood on the platform waiting for my train, I was amazed at how much English I was hearing all around me. It felt like the language was everywhere. People on their phones, talking to each other, and even the train announcements were in English. When the train finally arrived, I joined the crowd of commuters, and we packed ourselves into the train car. I stood there, holding onto the pole, observing everything around me. The ride felt surreal. I was in New York, surrounded by people speaking the language I had been learning for years. I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Every sentence I heard was another piece of the puzzle that I had been trying to complete. As I rode the subway, I also reflected on how much my English had improved over the years. I remembered when I first started learning, and how difficult it had seemed. I struggled with grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. I made plenty of mistakes, and there were times when I felt like giving up. But here I was, in New York City, navigating a busy subway system and holding my own in English. It was a proud moment for me. It reminded me that persistence really does pay off. After a quick subway transfer, I arrived at my destination, the hotel. I checked in and got my room key, and the excitement of the day continued to build. I dropped my bags in the room, took a deep breath, and then headed out to explore the city. I had to remind myself to stay present and take everything in. After all, I was in one of the most iconic cities in the world. My first stop was Times Square. As I walked down 7th Avenue, I couldn't believe how massive and bright it was. The billboards were glowing, the streets were filled with tourists and locals, and the atmosphere was electric. I felt like I was in the middle of a movie. I took pictures, watched street performers, and just marveled at the incredible sights around me. But I also noticed something else: the language. I was hearing English everywhere, but it was different from what I had studied in books or heard in podcasts. It was the real thing, the fast-paced, everyday English that people actually use in conversation. I heard people talking about the weather, discussing their plans, and even chatting about the subway. I started picking up new phrases and expressions that I hadn't encountered before. It was so exciting to realize that the English I had been learning was actually being used in the real world. The next day, I visited Central Park. As I strolled through the park, I overheard a conversation between two people about their favorite spots in the city. I decided to join in and asked, "Excuse me, what's your favorite place in New York?" They smiled and told me about a hidden cafe they loved. This was another big moment for me. Here I was, engaging in a spontaneous conversation with strangers in English, and they were friendly and open. I spent the next few days exploring New York City, visiting landmarks like the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Each new location was a chance to practice my English. I spoke to tour guides, ordered food at restaurants, and even asked for directions when I got lost. Every conversation helped me improve my fluency and made me feel more confident. By the time my trip came to an end, I was in awe of how much I had experienced. New York had not only given me the opportunity to see incredible sights, but it had also allowed me to immerse myself in the language I had been working so hard to learn. I had come so far, and I felt incredibly proud of myself. After leaving the bustling JFK airport, I stepped into a yellow taxi that would take me to my hotel. The driver, an older man with a thick accent, greeted me warmly as he closed the door behind me. The windows were down, and the sounds of New York City, honking horns, chatter, and the occasional screeching of the subway trains, filled the air. As we drove away from the airport, I couldn't help but marvel at the scenery outside. The streets were lined with towering skyscrapers that seemed to stretch endlessly towards the sky, their glass windows reflecting the early afternoon sunlight. It was everything I had imagined, yet somehow it felt even more alive in person. I had heard so much about New York City, the city that never sleeps. And as I looked out at the busy streets, I could see why. People were everywhere, walking briskly, talking on their phones, and hailing taxis. The energy in the city was contagious. It felt like the whole world was moving at once, and I was lucky enough to be a part of it. As we continued down the highway, I couldn't stop staring out the window. The iconic yellow cabs, street vendors selling hot dogs and pretzels, and the towering billboards that flashed advertisements. This was it. This was New York. I had seen it all in movies, television shows, and pictures, but nothing could have prepared me for the feeling of actually being here. The taxi driver was friendly, pointing out various landmarks as we passed by. "That's Times Square," he said, nodding towards the bright lights in the distance. "You'll probably want to check that out." I nodded enthusiastically, knowing that I would have to see the world-famous square for myself. A few minutes later, we pulled up to the entrance of my hotel. I had chosen a small but cozy place in the heart of Manhattan, a perfect base to explore the city. I paid the driver, thanked him, and stepped out of the cab. The moment my feet hit the pavement, I could feel the pulse of the city beneath me. The constant hum of activity seemed to flow through the streets like an electric current, and I was ready to dive in. After checking into my hotel, I made my way to my room. The view from my window was spectacular, overlooking the city skyline, with the Empire State Building visible in the distance. I took a moment to absorb it all, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. Here I was, in New York City, just like I had always dreamed. But I didn't want to waste any time. I was eager to get out and start exploring. I threw on my jacket, grabbed my camera, and headed out the door. My first stop was a place that had fascinated me for years, Central Park. I had seen pictures of Central Park in magazines, movies, and postcards, but nothing could compare to seeing it in person. As I walked towards the park, The atmosphere shifted. The hustle and bustle of the city faded, and the green expanse of the park seemed to provide a peaceful refuge from the urban jungle just outside its borders. The trees were lush and full of life, and the air felt fresher here, somehow calmer. It was hard to believe that this serene oasis existed right in the middle of one of the busiest cities in the world. I entered the park through one of its many entrances and began strolling along the paths. The park was full of people, but it didn't feel crowded. There were families enjoying picnics, joggers running along the trails, and tourists taking in the sights. I walked for what felt like hours, letting the sounds of nature and the occasional chatter of people around me relax my mind. As I walked deeper into the park, I started to feel a sense of peace and wonder, realizing that I had arrived at a place I had only ever seen in photographs. But as I continued walking, I quickly realized something. While I was immersed in the beauty of the park, I hadn't planned out where I was going. I had always been the type of traveler who liked to just wander and explore. But now, standing in the middle of Central Park, I had no idea where to head next. The park was huge, and I didn't have a map to guide me. I could see some signs around me, but none of them seemed to offer much clarity. I stopped for a moment, standing still and scanning the area. It was peaceful, but it was also overwhelming. That's when I remembered something from my English classes back home. Sometimes, the best way to figure things out was simply to ask for help. I had practiced English phrases in preparation for this trip, but now I was about to put them to use in a real-world scenario. I looked around and noticed a man sitting on a bench nearby. He was reading a newspaper and enjoying the calm atmosphere of the park. I decided to approach him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking just a little from the nerves. "Can you tell me how to get to Central Park?" The man looked up from his paper and gave me a curious smile. After a brief pause, he chuckled and said, "You're already in Central Park, buddy." I paused, feeling a little embarrassed. Of course, I was already in Central Park. I had been so wrapped up in the experience that I forgot I was already surrounded by its beauty. I couldn't help but laugh at myself, realizing how silly the situation had been. But rather than feeling embarrassed, I felt relieved. I had made a mistake, yes, but it didn't matter. The man wasn't judgmental. He simply gave me a friendly smile and pointed in the direction of some of the park's popular landmarks, offering a few suggestions about where to go next. "Just head over there to the Bow Bridge," he said. "And if you keep walking, you'll find the Bethesda Terrace. It's beautiful." I thanked him and followed his directions. This brief interaction, though small, made me feel much more at ease. It reminded me that it's okay to make mistakes, and that people are generally understanding and willing to help. After all, it wasn't just about speaking perfect English. It was about connecting with people and trying your best. I was getting better at both. As I continued exploring the park, I thought about how much I had grown since I first started learning English. I had come a long way from my early days of stumbling through conversations, worrying about grammar and pronunciation. Here I was, asking for directions from a stranger in New York, and I had managed to communicate successfully, even if I had made a small mistake. This experience helped me realize that language is not just about accuracy, it's about communication, connection, and confidence. The day continued to unfold, with me wandering through the park, exploring hidden corners and admiring the art, architecture, and nature all around me. I took countless photos, documenting my experience, and occasionally stopped to chat with other visitors from all over the world. English, it seemed, was the common thread that connected us all, and I found joy in the little interactions along the way. By the time I left Central Park, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I had explored a small part of the park, but it felt like I had explored a world of emotions and new experiences. I made my way back to the hotel, reflecting on how much I had learned not just about New York, but also about myself. In that one small interaction with the man on the bench, I had realized that language is much more than words. It's about the courage to try, the willingness to connect, and the patience to learn. As the sun began to set over the city, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. New York was everything I had hoped for, and more. I couldn't wait to see what the next day would bring. The next morning, after a restful night's sleep, I woke up feeling excited to explore more of New York City. The day before, I had wandered around Central Park, but I knew there was so much more to see. Today, I had my sights set on Times Square, the neon-lit heart of the city that never sleeps. The only problem was getting there. I had heard that the subway was the fastest and most efficient way to navigate the city, but I had never used a subway system quite like New York's. It was huge, busy, and a bit intimidating, especially for someone who was still getting comfortable with English. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had learned that in New York, it was all about embracing the chaos and going for it. So, after grabbing a quick breakfast at a local cafe, I set off for the subway station. The first thing that hit me when I entered the subway station was the noise. It was a blend of train sounds, the bustling crowd, and the occasional shouting of someone trying to catch a train. I took a deep breath and walked toward the ticket booth. The whole place seemed to buzz with energy, and it felt like I was in the middle of a living, breathing organism. I could see the tracks stretching out in every direction, each one labeled with a different number or letter, leading to a different part of the city. I glanced up at the large map of the subway system above me. It looked complicated, an intricate web of lines and connections that seemed impossible to decipher at first glance. I stared at the map for a while, trying to figure out which train I needed to take to get to Times Square. The map was full of colored lines, each one representing a different subway route. I could feel the pressure mounting. I didn't want to make a mistake or get on the wrong train. Just as I was about to give up and ask for help, I noticed a man standing nearby. He was holding a coffee in one hand and checking his phone with the other. He looked calm, like he had done this a million times before. He seemed to notice my confusion and gave me a friendly smile. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice warm and welcoming. I hesitated for a second, then decided to take the plunge. This was the moment I had been preparing for, another chance to use my English and navigate a real-life situation. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know how I can get to Times Square from here?" The man looked at the map briefly before turning back to me with a reassuring smile. "Sure. Take the one train uptown and you'll be there in about 10 minutes. His instructions were simple and clear, but I was grateful for the help. I thanked him and felt a sense of accomplishment wash over me. It wasn't just about the subway directions. It was about overcoming my hesitation and asking for help when I needed it. I had been nervous about speaking English in a real-world context, but this small interaction made me realize how much I had learned. The more I practiced speaking, the easier it became. With newfound confidence, I made my way to the platform where the one train was waiting. The train doors slid open, and I stepped inside, quickly finding a spot to stand. The subway car was packed with people, and the air was filled with the sound of conversations, the clinking of coins, and the occasional stop announcement, It was exactly what I had imagined, a mix of people from all walks of life, all crammed together in this one moving space. As the train rumbled down the tracks, I settled in and began listening to the conversations around me. I noticed that most people were speaking quickly, almost too quickly for me to fully understand. At first, it felt overwhelming. There were so many words I didn't recognize, and the speed at which people spoke was much faster than what I was used to. But instead of feeling discouraged, I made a conscious decision to keep listening. This was the real New York City. People here weren't speaking in slow, clear English for learners. They were speaking the way native speakers did. And if I wanted to truly immerse myself in the language, I had to embrace the challenge. I focused on picking out words I knew and tried to make sense of the sentences as a whole. I could hear phrases like, "I'm getting off at the next stop," and "Are you coming with me?" Common phrases that would be useful for me. I repeated them in my head, trying to remember how the words sounded in conversation. At the next stop, the subway car filled with more passengers, and I found myself standing closer to two tourists who were speaking in English. One of them was asking the other about the best places to visit in New York. They were discussing restaurants, museums, and neighborhoods they had already visited. I tuned into their conversation, trying to catch any new vocabulary or expressions that might come in handy for me. It was funny because at that moment, I realized that I wasn't just listening to practice my English, I was also picking up bits of information that could help me navigate New York better. I learned the names of some cool restaurants, tips about free events happening in the city, and even some slang phrases I hadn't heard before. The subway wasn't just a mode of transport, it was becoming a learning experience in itself. The train ride felt longer than it actually was. As the train reached my stop, I stood up, preparing to get off. The moment the train doors slid open, I was hit by the intense heat and noise of Times Square. The area was buzzing with people, tourists, locals, street performers, and vendors, all moving in every direction. The bright neon lights, flashing billboards, and huge crowds were exactly what I had imagined Times Square to be. But now that I was standing in the middle of it, it felt even more surreal. It was a chaotic yet exciting place, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. I took a few moments to soak it all in. I had made it. The subway had brought me here, and now I was standing in one of the most famous places on Earth. But, as always, my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to explore more. I wanted to meet new people, try new things, and learn even more about the city. I decided to take a walk around Times Square, observing everything around me. I saw a group of tourists taking photos in front of the giant screens, a street artist painting a portrait of a passerby, and vendors selling souvenir t-shirts. Everywhere I looked, there was something new and exciting to see. As I walked, I noticed a couple of travelers standing by a map, looking lost. They seemed to be struggling with where to go next, so I decided to offer a little help. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to them with a smile. "Are you looking for directions?" They turned to me, a bit surprised, but they welcomed the offer. I could tell they were tourists by their accent, but it was nice to connect with them. I explained how to get to a few landmarks nearby, feeling more confident as I spoke. It wasn't a long conversation, but it felt good to use my English to help someone else, just like others had helped me earlier in the day. As I continued my walk through the city, I thought about how much I had grown. Every interaction, no matter how small, was teaching me something new. The subway ride, the conversations, and the small gestures of kindness had shown me that traveling wasn't just about seeing new places. It was about connecting with people, understanding a culture, and embracing new challenges. And, with each new experience, my English was improving, bit by bit. By the time I left Times Square and made my way back to the subway, I felt a sense of pride.